All right, we should be good.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
All right, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. And on behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, August the 12th, 2021, at approximately 7:05. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Simmons, to please call the roll.
Williams?
Here.
Kretschmer?
Here.
Graziano?
Here.
O'Loughlin?
Here.
Nats? Here. Jasper?
Here.
Stefani? Here. Corey?
Here. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thanks very much, everyone. Welcome back. I'm glad to see that everybody hopefully didn't have too much trouble with the storm. We were out without power for about 24 hours, water in the basement, but here we are. So hoping nobody had to deal with that at their place. So you'll remember from our last meeting that we had a continuation, and one of the things that we need to do at this meeting is approve our meeting minutes. This is a standard thing that we do. We didn't have to do it at our last meeting, so the gentlemen that are up here on the dais would know this. So gentlemen, as I traditionally do, I'm just going to ask for general consent, but I just want to double check whether or not anyone has any questions about the meeting minutes from July the 8th. No? Okay, so via voice vote, the chair will ask for your approval of the meeting minutes dated July 8th, 2021. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen. For those of you that might not remember, the gentleman to my right, your left, this is Mr. Euler. He's our counsel here in Cary. He's here attending this meeting once again. So, Mr. Euler, thank you very much for joining us. And you may see that some of our members have a mask on. Anyone that wants to wear a mask, they're welcome to do that. My understanding as of today's date, unlike the high schools and the grade schools, is that it's optional in this environment. So wanted to make that to be publicly known. So at this time, I'm going to recall case number ZPA 06001. This is for Mr. and Mrs. Tomasello Walter. And this is for a conditional use for a type home occupation, outdoor swim lessons. I know many of you were in the room when we did this the last time. I think we have some updates from Mr. Simmons. And then the way we'll do this is we'll ask the petitioner once again to come forward with some of their findings. We will open it up to the public again for those of you that are interested in making comment. And it's the same procedure and process as we did last time, okay? So nothing unusual tonight other than it was a continuation. So at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Simmons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, the request this evening is a continuation of the case that was discussed back in July for the conditional use for home occupation. The petitioner is seeking approval to conduct swim lessons in the pool in the rear yard of the property. As the board will recall, back in July, the case was continued per the petitioner's request based off the testimony that was occurred during the zoning hearing. There was additional time was granted for the petitioner to have discussions with neighbors, potentially make revisions to their petition or proposed operation based off any feedback they received. Since that meeting, the petitioners had some discussions with neighborhood. They have conducted a survey, which I'll have the petitioners give some more information on their efforts in this case. And then we also have received, in the dais this evening, there was some additional correspondence that was received as well from the public, which was for your review, in addition to what was in the packet that was provided. So tonight's hearing is again to review the additional information that the petitioner may present, provide additional opportunity for public comment, and then potentially make a recommendation to the village board on the request. As a reminder, there are various standards that are in the zoning ordinance or unified development ordinance for conditional uses, which are summarized in the slide. The staff's recommendation from the first hearing to tonight has not changed. Obviously, there's an updated memo which gave a summary of what has transpired since the last meeting, but staff recommendation is still one of denial of the request. However, if the zoning board does recommend approval of the request, there are conditions that are recommended within the staff report that the board may put on a proposed operation in this light. So With that, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but otherwise we can turn it over to the petitioner and provide additional testimony on their part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons? So I do have a question for Mr. Simmons. We'll wait for this. So, Mr. Simmons, and for all of you that were assembled from last time, you may have recalled it says that the final arbiter of our discussion this evening would be our elected officials. And I'm just double checking with Mr. Simmons, independent of whatever decision is taken tonight, when would this formally go to the elected officials?
It would go to the meeting in September, which would be September 21st.
That would be the first time the
Correct.
petitioner would be able to potentially review the matter further.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so with that, I think what we'll do now, and I think some of you will recall when you came down the stairwell, there was a sign-in sheet, same process, procedure. The meeting is being recorded. We do have at least one person who's online with us. And when you approach the podium, we would simply ask that you state your name and address again for the record. And at this time, we'll ask Mr. and Mrs. Walter if you'd like to begin. And perhaps you could take up the discussion where we left off last time, or you want to review some of your surveys. It's completely up to you how you want to approach this. And again, the ZPA members might have some questions for yourself.
Are we supposed to listen again, with like Stacy and writes them down and talk again like last time?
Yes.
Yes,
Comment.
yes is the short answer.
I was just going to reiterate that
Yeah.
comment, that it's important for you to listen to the information that is shared with the Plan Commission tonight, Plan Commission Zoning Board. If you have any additional information to share after you hear what everyone here has to say, that's fine. I also wanted, for everyone in attendance, I just handed the petitioners copies of letters that were tendered to the Plan Commission Zoning Board tonight. I don't know that they had copies of those, so we just provided those to them so they can take a look at those and make any comments you have this evening. Okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Euler. And so just to try to remind everybody about that process, it's not designed when the petitioner is speaking that there's some kind of cross-examination going on there. However, as Mr. Euler recommends, is that I would be taking notes when the public does speak again, and then once they conclude, we can ask you to come back up and potentially address those concerns. Does that sound fair? Okay, very good. So why don't we have you come up and you can take the discussion whatever way you prefer to do it tonight.
Okay, Jill and Jesse Walter, 550 Red Cypress.
Thank you very much.
Last time we were here at the end of the meeting, part of the recommendation by the board was to talk to our neighbors, specifically the ones that were at the meeting, see if we could come up with some sort of consensus that would work, hopefully for swim lessons as well as for the neighborhood. Being a teacher, I went to my Google Drive and started to formulate a survey. Most of the things that we disperse through school for parent and student feedback, it's nice to send out electronically and then you can see the results right on the paper. So I did formulate a survey. Many of the questions were based off what we had noted as the meeting went on July 8th. And then I sent emails to those that were listed or that were legible on the sign-in sheet. And then I waited a couple days with that. And if they hadn't responded, I tried to Facebook message or text message if I happened to have their phone number to ensure that they had gotten the survey. I also posted it on our, we have a Lions Ridge subdivision Facebook group. And even though there were only at that time 5 neighbors at the meeting, I just kind of addressed the whole community. I think I did put a copy of that screenshot that I think 52 members of our community and our subdivision had seen the post. And I did ask if anybody else was willing to give feedback, concerns, to please also fill out the survey so we'd have a little bit more knowledge of where our neighbors were coming from. So I did submit that as some of my paperwork. So if you look through the pages, starting with page 3, you can see the different questions that we asked. They had specific answers that they could answer to, and then they also had the additional option as to add in their own input. So it wasn't totally directed by myself. So we asked about parking. I know parking was one of the major concerns at the July 8th meeting, that they didn't, many of the neighbors were concerned about safety and just parking in general with the overcrowdedness. And based on some of the recommendations that were in what Brian had given, if we were granted approval, we changed from parking on the road to parking only in our driveway, having 4 cars or less, to try to help alleviate one of those problems for our neighbors. So you can see, I won't read over all the percentages, but you can see some people said this was not a concern at all. This is an adequate solution or doesn't meet our concerns. We also gave the option that swimmers could be given pickup or drop-offs only. And we also said that they could come in from the east side of the subdivision and exit the west, so that way the traffic flowed in one direction. So really trying to eliminate any of those problems that were brought up when it came to like traffic and safety. I also put in there that we could stagger the classes 5 to 10 minutes so that one class had exited our driveway before another class or another family came in. So that's on page 4. As far as the noise levels, I know that was one of the things that was presented at the meeting. We said that we could ask parents to, again, do the pickup drop-off only and to wait in their cars so that there was no additional sound coming from our property. And just to wait in the car, I'm sorry, to wait in the car in general, just to keep those sounds down. We also said that we could install bushes or a larger hedge along our property lines or some sort of berm. We talked to one of the neighbors about that when we had a face-to-face conversation about, again, trying to eliminate as much sound as possible. By eliminating or reducing the number of cars in a class or people coming, naturally we hope that that would also bring down some of the sound levels. So again, all those percentages are on there. Most neighbors either thought it wasn't a concern or the solutions that we had put on the question, it was an adequate solution. We also put on the survey appropriate numbers for classes. I gave them the option of reducing it from 5 to 6, which is typical of what our family size is, down to 3 to 4, 2 to 3 in a class, or even 1 to 2. If you look at the percentages on page 7, it's kind of all over the board. Most people again, didn't have major concerns with 4 or 5 kids, and many people said it wasn't a concern of theirs at all. We also wrote on the survey that lessons ran for 8 weeks the previous summer. They were only scheduled for 6 weeks due to our family schedule this summer. And I gave them some options. Lessons could be ran for less or none at all, depending on what our family's life is like in the future. But what do you feel is an appropriate number of weeks? 71% said it wasn't even a concern of theirs, and the other 28% said 4 to 5 weeks would be acceptable. On page 8, noise, privacy, and traffic. What is your preference for when it comes to disruptions in the neighborhood? I offered to either run morning lessons only and no night, or vice versa. And again, most people said this wasn't a concern, or maybe just do morning only. I asked if they would prefer to have a notice or a schedule to be given to them before summer starts, so they're aware of any conflicts or just people coming into the neighborhood. And 28% said yes, and the rest said it wasn't a concern of theirs, or no, it was not needed. We also asked if there was any other concerns that were not addressed at the meeting. Most people wrote back that they didn't have any. Some people were very positive to continue. Others said to limit the number of families per hour. And then the last question was if they voiced their opinion at the board meeting, when was a good time to talk or set up a meeting. Most people that did it wrote that it wasn't needed or any time in the evening, and then we met with them. So we really tried hard to meet all of the different concerns that our neighbors had in the survey, just to get a little bit more of a general feel of what they were thinking and how we could make changes. And again, all of those questions gave them the opportunity to also provide their own feedback or suggestions for change. If you look on page 11, I kept kind of a log of people that we talked to in the neighborhood. We went above and beyond than just the 5 people that attended the meeting. I reached out in a variety of methods, whether it was email, Facebook Messenger, text messages, and then one night we did go around door to door and knocking on people's doors to talk to them and kind of have my follow-up responses. Generally, the people that we talked to, for the most part, had positive things to say, or if we were able to eliminate some of the traffic and the noise, they said that they would be more apt to allow lessons to continue. Just page 12 is just a screenshot of just my post to the Facebook group, and that was seen by many people. When we did ask people face-to-face, when we went door-to-door, when we hadn't heard from them, a lot of feedback was just that either it wasn't a concern for them or they just didn't want to get involved. Page 13 is just a follow-up of people that we talked to. One of the recommendations by one of the board members was to find out some liability in insurance. We did reach out to our insurance agent, and he gave us a recommendation of a couple different brokers, and we did reach out to them to get insurance, and we got a quote, and I included that in there as well. Obviously, it's not instated right now, but we did do our research, and that would be something that we would implement if we were granted the permit. And then the last few pages, many of you, if you're on social media, might have seen these, are just some examples of just some things, some tragic accidents that have happened in the last 3 weeks. There was a drowning of a 5-year-old little girl in Fox River Grove, a 3-year-old in Lake Villa, that both resulted in deaths, and then a drowning in Crystal Lake, all in the last 3 weeks. So I just attached those. I had a lot of people that reached out wanting to know how the permit hearing was going, if I was going to be able to do swim lessons, based on just what's been in the media with those accidents lately. For changes, I know Brian, I had emailed Brian, and he had suggested if there was any things that we wanted to change. We kind of followed the proposal that he said if we were to get the grant or the permit. A few changes that I noted or I had emailed him is that, we wouldn't start at 7 o'clock. Earliest time would be 7:30. But we also said that we would change from 6 to 8 weeks to 3 to 6 weeks. So limiting it and having it less in the summer for less interruptions for our neighbors. We thought that was a fair result after talking to them and listening to some of their concerns to lessen the time or impact. I know the year is only 52 weeks, but 3 to 6 weeks we thought would be a much better solution that many of our neighbors might be a little bit more open to. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I don't have much to add, just Jesse Wolter, 550 Red Cypress.
Thank you.
Gary, yep, sorry. Don't have much to add, just I think it's important to note that, really did our due diligence of what we were asked to do to kind of go talk to the neighbors. The point of that, the survey went out to the community of Lions Ridge, not just the immediate people that were asked to touch base with, and 52 people saw the survey. As you guys can see, only 7 filled it out. The response through the people when you talk to them face-to-face or through messages to Jill was, overwhelmingly of either we don't want to get involved, which is understandable, or we kind of, maybe the idea of not caring, or just didn't want to talk to us. Those are the 3 options. So yes, the survey is limited in numbers, but that's why we followed up and went door to door and actually talked to a lot more people than the survey even showed on there and got some feedback. I think one of the biggest things that was mentioned, that really stuck out to me in the door-to-door conversations. We went to one neighbor that spoke up against this in July, and mentioned that, definitely willing to work with us and willing to work with making this work, whether that's sound barriers and things like that. The biggest thing was convincing our immediate neighbors, the Myers, to get on board. So really, kind of struck a chord with me of, is this like really an issue with our neighbors, all our neighbors? Or is it really an issue with one set of neighbors that are kind of rallying the troops and getting people behind them? Because that was was the feedback of just, you guys got to get them on board. And then I think I'm okay with it as long as you guys do the stuff that you're willing to do, the village is asking you to do. So that really stuck out to me, is this starting to get to be more of like a, bullying's not the right word, but kind of a pressuring of neighbors because their friends in the community have been there for a while, more than is it really an issue? Because everyone that we talked to in the immediate vicinity that we had to reach out to, door to door, the two, people that spoke up against this, the two on the right of us, two on the left of us, the people behind us, people across the street that we were able to talk to, everyone but one family was willing to work with us on coming up with a solution. Now, I think maybe there's still some room to work on that solution and still come to common ground, but everyone we had talked to was willing to come up with a solution. So that kind of struck a chord with me and really kind of opened my eyes, like, hey, what's this really getting to be all about? Is this just, we're backing some people that we grew up, we've been here for a long time with, or are we really having an issue with this business thing? So just wanted to point that out. All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Walter. So before you adjourn back to your seats, I think there may be some questions from the ZPA members here. So let me just see who has questions.
What would the morning time be? I heard you say 7:30 as a start.
Yeah, usually we're done by 11:30. But again, just like we said in July, I mean, if the board recommends to be done by 10, we can be done by 10. In no
Start
way are
later.
we
Yeah, start later.
set in like, this is how it's got to be. We're very still open to suggestions to make whatever needs to work.
Same thing with the amount of times per week. Is it, when you say 3 to 6
Mon-
weeks, is it 3 to 5 days a week or is it every day?
It's 4 days, Monday through Thursday.
Half an hour lessons, yeah, 4 days a week.
Anything else, Mr. Williams?
No.
No. All right, well, I'll see if the other gentlemen have questions, but I did have a few myself, so I want to be clear on what you're asking for here, because here we are now in August, the kids are back in school. The next meeting that the elected officials will have formally is the 21st of September. So if this were somehow approved, are you anticipating doing lessons this year? You are not. This year is not
We have a
going
baby
to happen.
coming in 4 weeks, so this would be for next summer.
Right. And Mr. Walter, this is specifically to you, sir, because you actually said this, and I'm just repeating back. You said there's room to work on a solution, and I wonder if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, I just think that even in the survey, there was varied things of, some of our neighbors that put in the survey or talked to us that they'd rather have, only 1 to 2 families an hour, or one family an hour, like a typical, I don't know, like a voice lesson, one kid singing every half an hour. I think there's still like there's not one set direction from one person. It's a variety of things that I think that there's still some common ground that can be accomplished. I don't know how we come up with that when you have varied things from different people, So meeting in the middle to me makes the most sense of a compromise. But I don't know what the expectation is there to please everyone to the smallest category of one person every half an hour, only for 1 hour a day. I don't know where the goal in mind is. To me, it sounded like the goal is to come up with a compromise, which is where we did the survey and then went and talked to people and trying to find a middle ground for that.
Okay, well, thank you
Yeah.
very much for responding to that. Gentlemen, before I open it up to the public, I just want to make sure that no one else has questions for the petitioner. All right, thank you again, Mr. and Mrs. Walter, we appreciate it. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the time where we will open up the meeting once again. I don't have the sign-in sheet in front of me, so maybe that will make it easier to, or if you just want to, like we did last time, whoever wants to come up and speak are welcome to do that. We can do it that way. I can just call up the sign-in sheet. Whatever's easy for you is easy for me.
Presume.
And we have somebody online, I believe, that may want to speak also.
For the individuals that are participating via Zoom, if you'd like to speak, you can use the raise your hand feature in the Zoom function, and then we'll be able to call on you from that standpoint and give you an opportunity to speak in the meeting.
So is there anyone that wanted to speak? Okay, well, why don't we start with the young lady here? And again, just remember that it's name and address for the record is
Sure.
getting recorded, so thank you very much.
Sure. Grace Ann and Mark Cohen, and we're at 9 Milton Court. We did not respond to the survey, as my initial thought on the survey was that it was a personal survey, that I didn't understand that there would be information collected and that the Walters would actually submit it back to the village. So I felt it was just a gathering of information, and I didn't see anything on the survey that addressed my concern as a property owner in that neighborhood, which is having a business located in a neighborhood that property values would be affected. And there's nothing that we've talked about in these last 2 meetings to talk about what does that mean when you have a business located in an established neighborhood. I've been there 17 years, and I do not want to be living next to a business. I would move to Main Street if I wanted to live next to the gold watch guy. But I didn't see my letter in the packet, so perhaps you got it after you published it. But that's my biggest concern, is that the property values. As a side note, if this does get approved, my question to the village is who will monitor any of these concessions? Who is going to monitor that traffic would come from one section and go over there, and that there'd only be 4 cars and maybe 2 and 3 kids and not 1 kid? And so I would think that the expense that the village would have to take on to monitor a business being established in a neighborhood would be pretty immense. So I think swim lessons are great, and my kids, did swim lessons all through the 2 or 3 locations that offer it in Cary and Crystal Lake. But my biggest concern as a property owner is when I sell my house and I have to show that our subdivision now has a business located in it, and I have 7 neighbors that all have pools. So are you going to approve conditional use for swim lessons to all 7, including my next door neighbor? No. That's not acceptable to me as a property owner, and I feel like the village should be protecting me with their code that says neighborhoods are here and businesses are here.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Cohen, did you want to speak?
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I think it's the precedent that,
Would you just, for
I'm
the
sorry,
record? Yeah.
the only concern I have is the precedent it sets. If you allow business within a residential, that will open up hundreds of other issues several other issues that could easily occur. If I want to open up a daycare center next to my thing, well, now you set a precedent that a business is allowed in my residential area. I can't even think of all the various scenarios that could occur. So, thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Cohen. So I did see a gentleman here, I think he was in the yellow, that wanted to speak? Okay. And did, okay.
Hi, my name is Ron Stanley, 555 Red Cypress Drive.
Thank you.
We were the ones on the survey. The way I look at it, when our son was growing up, we took him to in-home lessons at different homes. And I didn't think that that was terrible for the neighborhood, but I never ran into another person. And all the time I did that, waiting to go to the lessons or picking up kids from the lessons. So we made the suggestion, 1 family per hour and 6 families maximum per day. And I thought, that's, my wife and I married, that's kind of what we consider to be something that wouldn't really be that intrusive in the neighborhood if they did that. We don't live right next door to them, but we were thinking 1 family unit, the most you're going to have is maybe 1 or 2 kids, and 1 per hour, shouldn't be too much of a burden on the neighborhood. So that's what we were thinking. I mean, I'm concerned about the property values too. If I want to sell my home, do I have to disclose that we have a commercial swim school across the street from us? I mean, it's not going to help sell my house, that's for sure. So, I'm trying to be fair. This is the compromise that I came up with. I mean, we're not as affected by the noise, but we do have a pool right next to us. And so, we are familiar with the parties and stuff that go on, so we can't sympathize with the noise. Now, whether my compromise will be enough for the people that live right next to them with the noise, I don't know. I can't say that, but, we live pretty much across the street, and the traffic was the main problem. And I think, the idea of having 4 cars pulling in at one time to drop kids off or pick kids up in their driveway it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like, where would you allow that? Having 4 cars coming and going, dropping off small kids in a confined driveway. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me to allow something like that. I mean, 1 car, maybe, but 4 cars at one time, it sounds crazy to me. Anyway, that's our thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stanley. So I know we have someone that's raised their hand online with us via Zoom, so I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons to bring them online and they can ask their question. Or are they asking it through you, Brian?
There's 2 people now that have risen their hand. T.R. White is the first one. I'll call on them, allow them to talk. And then there's a second individual that's requested to speak as well.
All right, so if Miss or Mr. White can hear my voice, the mic is open and you're welcome to ask your question or make your comment.
Can you hear mine okay?
I hear something over here.
I gotta turn the volume up.
All right, stand by for a moment. We can barely hear you. We're going to adjust the volume here at Village Hall.
Okay, perfect.
Translate.
So maybe the good news is this new Village Hall we're building is going to have all this kind of bells and whistles built in. We won't have to worry about this anymore pretty soon.
Good plug.
We can hope.
Try now.
Are you ready?
Yes. Wow.
You can hear me good?
We can
My
hear
name is Mrs. White. I live at 7911 Pin Oak Drive in Wonder Lake. I've known Jill for a very long time. I was an aquatic instructor at the YMCA in McHenry County, right there in Crystal Lake. Jill worked for me for several years, and I'm a huge advocate for swim lessons. When Jill approached me with this, of course I agree with Jill. I've had seen at-home swim lessons before. They're usually it's like 1 in the water, and there's usually 2 to 3 students, depending on the family size. There's usually not a lot of noise that I have noticed. Like the gentleman said that lived across the street from Jill, that he utilized at-home swim lessons. They're basically like a one-on-one kind of like private lesson. I know when I was the aquatic instructor, a lot of families truly wanted that one-on-one swim lesson to where that child can get that care that they need in order to succeed to becoming a swimmer. In order to, if they do go in a backyard pool, they can save themselves. They have the capability to, if they do fall in, they have that capability to try and swim towards the side of the pool. And I know I'm a huge advocate for swim lessons for anybody, because I've seen there's way too many drownings, and with all the lakes, rivers, pools that are within the surrounding community, it is needed so much. And being a former aquatics director, I think this is pretty perfect. I could totally understand everybody's worried about the driving situation, but after hearing what they had talked about and what they had talked with the neighbors about, I think they're coming up with a very good plan. So, and if it's just 1 family per hour, like the gentleman said, I think that's, I think that's a win-win situation. I'm not sure if property values go down, but you got to think about the community and how this is helping other kids, and she's going to help other kids in case they fall into that situation and try and help in situations. I'm a huge advocate for this.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mrs. White. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So I think we're going to go to the next individual who's joined us online via Zoom. And I think we're trying to open up your mic now, so just bear with us.
There you go. Ms.
Can you
Domino?
hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. My name is Lisa Domino. I live here in Perry, and I had signed first of all, I have 2 boys, and I have, I think it's extremely important, swim lessons, not because I want my kid on swim team or because I want him to win a gold medal. I want him to be able to save themselves.
Ms. Domino, was that the extent of your comment, or did we lose you? Ms. Domino, if you can hear my voice, we can't hear you, so just stand by a moment. Wonderful. Fantastic. Always works. Well, maybe what we'll do, folks, while we're going through this process is there anyone sitting here in Village Hall that would like to speak? And then we'll go back to Ms. Domino. You, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she dropped off.
Okay. We'll see if she joins us again. Good evening.
Hi, I missed the sign-in sheet, but my name is Paul Sarah. I live at 7 Milton Court, down the street and around the corner. I would like to ask the board to completely discount any of the comments made from the parents of students of the swim class because they don't live in our neighborhood. Of course, it's the duty of every parent to get their kid to learn how to swim so they can save themselves. No one's arguing that. No one's arguing that Jill is a great teacher. But these people are not the ones affected by the things that happen in our neighborhood. They're the ones causing some of the problems. So again, the ones that are most affected by this process are the immediate neighbors and then the greater neighborhood of Lions Ridge. We were one of the couples that did not fully respond to the survey because the survey did not have a question whether or not we thought having a swim business in the neighborhood was even appropriate. It was only how to improve a swim business that was already there. So we wrote a letter suggesting that no swim business was appropriate in the neighborhood. Most people did not respond to the survey, probably because they don't want a confrontation with their neighbors. And that's certainly understandable. But again, it's the immediate neighbors on both sides, across the street, down the street, that are most affected by this process. I do not think it is appropriate for our neighborhood to have a swim business. And I would request that the board turn down this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah. So I'm just double checking with Mr. Simmons here to see if we've reconvened with Ms. Domino.
She joined the meeting again, so I could try to allow her to
Okay.
talk.
I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can.
We can now, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I don't know what all you heard, but basically I was just saying that I
You
do
dropped
live in
off on the
Cary.
gold
I
medal.
have 2
You dropped off on the gold
children
medal.
that I want to become strong swimmers. I am more than happy to, accommodate any requests made by neighbors and to be respectful of their property and of the concerns that they have. I come probably from a different standpoint. The gentleman said I don't live in the neighborhood. He is correct. But I had a brother that drowned, so that puts me in a different situation. And although that's not, any fault of his own, I'm very passionate about this. And I've also heard that there's other places where you can take your children to swim, which is very true. The problem is they're very large classes and your child doesn't get the attention, and the limited amount of time there is in the summer to swim, when you're in a huge class with multiple children, they don't, unfortunately, some kids do. I'm not saying, every kid will drown. That's not true. But being on the other end of it, she's a phenomenal teacher. She is respectful. She's great with the kids. And it's just unfortunate because then it takes away just another option to possibly save another life. So I just ask that you would at least consider it and just know that the people that would be coming are willing to, it was, 85 degrees. I happily sat in my car. I left any time that I could, and I would continue moving forward. I just don't want people to feel like this is swimmers against the neighborhood. I certainly don't feel that way, and I want to be respectful of you and your homes as well. So I just didn't know if you were aware of that, but so that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mino. Okay, so I'm looking around the room here. Mr. Meyer.
Good evening. My name is Mel Meyer, and I live at 560 Red Cypress Drive. We, as the closest and most immediate family impacted by the proposed conditional use for type B home occupation, oppose the granting of this variance. We do this because the logistics required to bring and take multiple students to and from swim lessons, as well as the noise and safety issues involved, will cause unreasonable detriment to us, as well as our neighbors in our neighborhood. When asked to complete the questionnaire, we went with the option outlined that Chairman Horry said was an option at the end of last meeting, and simply said, sorry, we cannot help you, since there was not an option available to us that we felt we could help them with. Jill emailed back to us, thank you for letting us know. Regardless of the makeup of the new proposal, could be up to 100 trips a day. The reality is that additional cars driving up and down our street, morning, day, and night, dramatically impacts the character of the neighborhood. An increase in traffic where the dozens of young children will be dropped off and picked up is inviting danger. In addition, as we have discussed, the noise from the location of that pool carries over to the neighbor's property on both sides in a very big way. If you visit the location, you'll see that the pool is sunk. It's sunk behind the house. And the house forces the noise outward. We encourage normal family pool time and activities. We oppose utilizing this pool as a commercial business and conducting the lessons primarily for the purpose of generating a profit, to the detriment of the neighborhood as a whole and to the loss in property values. We are fortunate in this community to be able to have two great facilities already offering great opportunities for swimming lessons. For over 130 years, Sage YMCA has been teaching children and adults to swim. Barb and I actually had all of our kids, probably at the age of 1.5 to 2, at the Sage YMCA learning how to swim. We couldn't agree more. It's critical to be able to swim, trust me. The Community Pool Center offers group, semi-private, and private swim lessons to children as young as 6 months to teens across all experience levels at a facility with regulated health and safety equipment. The lessons are taught by certified American Red Cross Learn to Swim program water safety instructors. Add to this, the new Park District Aquatic Center, which we've been waiting so long for in this community, is opening in 2022. And the obvious conclusion is we have a community well-served with qualified and approved swim lessons and related programs. The conclusion, we oppose our neighbors running a commercial business of this magnitude on our residential street, with the associated traffic, safety issues, and noise. Such commercial activity prevents us and our neighbors from the use and enjoyment of our own properties. It forces us and our neighbors to absorb the impact of the swim school on and around our homes and the resulting loss in property values that go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. So is there anyone else here that would like to speak? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bruce Overlease, 515 Red Cypress. My wife and I weren't here at the last meeting, and we did not participate in the survey because we didn't have access to the medium of the survey that was provided to us. So I'll give you some of my inputs, but I will point out that it's kind of like having the fox watch the hen house when the petitioner's doing the survey. So I've been working from home quite a bit, and like a lot of us have been, and it struck me this last summer how many young kids we have walking up and down the street. And they're, 2, 3, 4 years old. Parents are usually there, but they run out in front or they're on a bike. As traffic goes up, there's a higher risk of that happening. And so you never know what happens. And as you start thinking through scenarios like, hey, we'll have every hour have something that's just more traffic coming up and down the street that we've got to be considering from a safety perspective. And I'm a big believer in swimming. My kids went through swimming. Boy Scouts drive swimming, so I think it's important. But I think there are other mediums available for people to be able to get to that access and have the availability. The other thing I think we have to think through is the precedence. So somebody mentioned we have 7 pools in our neighborhood. So we now have 1 commercial service. Well, a second person, a third person. You follow the same process, the traffic keeps going up. Are we really doing the right thing from serving our neighborhood and doing the right stuff? And then now move that across other neighborhoods in Cary. So please consider that. My wife and I both oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask, excuse me, Mr. Simmons, if we can see if we can bring online the third person that wants to speak.
Sure.
And was there anyone left here in Village Hall that wanted to speak? One more. Okay, so right after this, we'll go up to yourself.
And
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Powell, and I live at 3920 Wisteria Court in Lake in the Hills, and I understand that I'm not a member of this community. However, I do feel that the voice of the larger community needs to be heard as well. And, what I'm hearing is that, the board asked Jill and Jesse to go through and how they could make it be a reasonable request. And that was what was asked of them to do. They did it. And if there were members who didn't feel like they were being heard, they had every opportunity to say what they wanted to say on those questions. And maybe there wasn't an exact question that asked them whether or not that they would be able to agree or disagree with having the swim lessons, but it was asked of them to find a compromise. And so I believe that that's what the survey did do. I also believe that when you say that there are other aquatic centers that offer the same thing, I beg to differ that they offer the same service. I heard that the YMCA has had however many students. Well, I am a parent of a student that was in the YMCA. I spoke at the last meeting about my daughter almost drowning at one of those lessons at the Sage YMCA. And so I don't necessarily believe that that is the right place for every single student. I take my kids to a swim lesson that I would want them to be 100% safe because that's why I'm taking them there. And that did not happen. I have never once felt like my kids were in any way, shape, or form in danger in Jill's care. As a parent, you're not only wanting your kids to get confident in water, but you also want you to feel confident with your kids in water. And I can honestly say that I did not feel that way with my kids after my daughter almost drowned in a pool that had about 7 lifeguards within close proximity to my daughter. She was underwater for 57 seconds. 57 seconds with 7 lifeguards within a reaching distance to her, and I was the one that almost jumped in to save her. And that would never happen in a situation like this. And I understand that I'm not a member of that community, but I do feel like we should be respected and heard by what we need as a larger community and what's needed for other people. And Jill is not doing this for profit. I believe wholeheartedly that her intent
is with good intentions, and she's fighting a good fight, and it's not for the reasons why I think everyone else is saying. And I have to beg to differ that there is not any other businesses that are being out of other people's homes that maybe are inside of their houses that aren't being registered. And only because hers is outside and it's visible is she being targeted, where other members who might have in-home businesses that are not registered and have parties for Pampered Chef, where they have parties for their Rodan and Fields, or whatever these, direct marketing services are, they're allowing that to be run out of your house. So I don't see why that this is any different. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pollan. So we'll go to this young lady here.
Hi, I'm Lisa Anderson. I live at 530 Red Cypress, which is 2 doors down from Jill and Jesse. We've been in our home now for 27 years. We love our neighborhood. We've seen it grow. We were one of the originals in our neighborhood with the little kids and watching them grow up. Swim lessons at different areas that worked for individual families. I took mine to Crystal Lake, and we had pretty small class sizes for swim lessons. So again, we have nothing against having swim lessons. It's just, do we want that in our neighborhood? For us, being 2 doors down, we have more of an issue from a noise standpoint. So we can be out on our deck, which I love being out on our deck in the mornings, drinking my coffee, reading the paper. And then in the evenings with the kids, we usually like to try to have family dinners out on the patio as well. You don't get that many nice days here in Illinois to be able to do that. So we take full advantage of it in the summertime. What happened last summer with COVID and Jill doing swim lessons, we did not have an issue with it, even though you heard the noise all throughout the day. Because as was mentioned before, their pool is sunk down, and from their backyard to ours, it's wide open. So we can actually see into their backyard. There's not a lot of privacy. But again, hearing the kids' noises is not an issue. We love that. We, both my husband and I, we have coached kids from soccer, basketball, and softball for many years when they were growing up. I work in the school district, so it's not that we don't love to hear kids' voices and laughter. But Jill is really good at what she does because her voice echoes, and she has to be able to do that. So if the kids, as they're splashing and having a good time in the pool during their lessons, can be heard. But what happens when you hear that mantra over and over all day, we were joking at the end of the day going to bed, okay, we've got this mantra in our head, up, out, together, kick, or whatever the lesson was for that day. So we made a little bit of a joke of it, and that was fine. Because, again, there was no other opportunity for those kids to have lessons last year, and that was important. But when it started up again this year, we were like, oh no, are we going to have to hear that every morning, every evening again? And it was getting to the point where we would have gone and had a conversation with them, but then we were gone for a while, and then the next thing you know, everything had kind of blown up. So from our perspective, we would have reached out and would have loved to have had a conversation with them to say, hey, this is what's going on. As we move forward, though, and looking at this, again, as I said, we've been in our house for 27 years. We're semi-empty nesters. We've got 2 left in college. So, yeah, we're talking about where are we going to move to next. So what comes into our conversation is more a standpoint of what's it going to do to our property value. When we do go to put our house up on the market and people know that, hey, there's swim lessons going over there, hopefully we find a family that would be all excited that, hey, I can go 2 doors down and have swim lessons. But you don't know that. You don't know what kind of people are going to be wanting to purchase our house, and will that impact our property value, given that we're 2 doors down and it's very visible and the noise level is escalated. So the other question that I would ask of you all is, have you issued a conditional permit before for swim lessons in a residential neighborhood? And if so, how's that worked out? If we haven't, are we setting up a precedent here? And as some of our other neighbors have mentioned, we have a number of pools in our neighborhood. So, hey, sounds good to me. What if I went and got my certification to teach instructional swim lessons and use a neighbor's pool to do it? I'm off in the summers, I could do that too. But is that really the right thing to do in a residential neighborhood? In a community like Lions Ridge, that our houses are all pretty close to one another, and you can hear the instructional voice over and over. So we don't have so much the impact of the cars in front of us, but I will tell you that I do take walks in the morning or early in the evening. And as one of our other neighbors had mentioned, on one of my walks, there was a time where a mom was getting her baby out of the car, and the other two kids, because she had parked on the other side of the street, ran out in the street. And all I thought about was, what happens when a car comes down the road? So those are just some points that I wanted to make and have you think about before you take your vote tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Did you want to speak, Mr. Anderson, or? Oh, good, okay. So I'm double checking here again with Mr. Simmons to see if there's anyone.
Nobody online.
Okay. Good evening.
Hi, David Smith, 1166 Danbury Drive. I hope that didn't come out of my hair. Been listening all night, friends of Jill and Jesse, and I hear a lot of great arguments. I've heard the property value. I test that. I wonder if that's more perceived or more of a reality, because I bet all the neighbors would be surprised the number of haircutteries and daycares and stuff that would be happening in a pretty close proximity. I thought the last couple had a really great point in the fact that, well, if it's noise and it drives down property value, that's definitely a consideration. From what I understand, they're running the swim lessons in the morning and whatnot, so this morning, day, and evening, I guess that's maybe a perceived or an exaggeration, maybe to make a point. I don't think anybody's going to debate the importance of swim lessons or teaching children how to swim. I don't think anybody would debate if Jill's good at it or not. She's certified. She's been doing it for years. I heard a couple disappointing chuckles on saying, hey, it's for profit. That's a little bit cynical, right? You've got two teachers raising two kids, about to have a third one on the way. We all do what it takes to feed our families, right? When you sell your homes in that neighborhood, those are family homes. Likely the neighbors bought those homes to raise families in. I quite frankly think it might raise the property value because I don't have to take my kids to the Y to get swim lessons. I get to take them down the street. And when we talk about traffic and whatnot, these are parents bringing kids in to the neighborhood. And I don't know where everybody's at in having kids or if they've had kids, but there's no safer driver than a parent with small kids because they're always looking out because they always expect the unexpected. I think it's unfortunate where this is at because there's a main complainant and there's a division in the neighborhood and nobody wins, right? It's probably cringeworthy for some of the neighbors in the neighborhood that didn't want to take the survey or didn't want to participate because they don't want to get in the middle, right? There's no winners here, right? But when I look at the previous slide and I read the different points as what it takes to qualify for this, is it a certification, guys? I didn't see anything that they'd be that would be out of compliance. What they're doing, the logistics, if we were able to bring that last slide up, if that's what it takes to be compliant to get this permit, I think they fall into all that. I think they're adding a service. I think it's a value to the community. It's easy for me to say. I've been over there. My kids do not take swim lessons there. I have 3 small boys. But when we talk about how it affects a community, I live in a community. I know what's important in my community. And I think that you should seriously consider granting this permit to a young family doing a service for the community. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, so I'm double checking here with Mr. Simmons to see if there's anyone online. There is not. And I'm double checking with all of us assembled here to see if there's any additional comment on the petition. And there is not. So Mr. and Mrs. Walter, as we talked about earlier with council, this is your opportunity, should you choose, to address any of the comments that you just heard, and you're welcome to do that at this time.
Just some of the points that I wrote down. Oh, sorry, Jill Tomasello, or Jill Walter, 550 Red Cypress.
Thank you.
about who would monitor us. I know one of the conditions of the permit, if it was granted, was turning in a roster ahead of time, or if neighbors wanted it. That obviously would help answer those problems as far as who's going to be checking in, because you would have all of the facts of who's actually going to be in the pool and at what time. I know that there are a lot of other locations, and something that we did speak about on the July 8th meeting was the offerings, the timings, the location, most importantly, the financial costs. It was one of the articles I included in the July 8th meeting about why so many kids don't have swim experiences, because their parents can't afford it. And then the level of experience of the instructor as well. We have a babysitter that actually is getting trained at the Dolphin Swim Club, and she has a 1-week training, and she's 16 years old. So when you ask some of the parents who have come to me for lessons, one of the reasons why many of them will state why they like coming is because of my level of experience, the different credentials that I have earned over the years, which I think sets me a little bit apart from some of those 16 and 17-year-old kids at the Park District and at the Y. Nothing against any of those places. I worked at the YMCA for 5.5 years. I was a swim coach there. That's where I got most of my training. I was a water safety instructor, a lifeguard instructor. I was training high school and college students at the Huntley Park District for 5 summers, and all of those skills. So it's definitely in my background and in my education. I don't know anything about the property values of homes. We've only bought two houses. I don't know if you have to disclose, and maybe you guys can speak to this, whether or not it has to be disclosed, whether or not there's a permit given. I know that's a big concern for our neighbors. I don't know that when we've ever looked at a home, it's been stated that this house is zoned one way or the other. So I don't know how legitimate those concerns are, but we do hear.
My question would be, is all the home businesses that have the different license, of haircut places and singing lessons and music lessons, does any of that, need to be disclosed? And if not, because of the license it is, and ours is a different license, would ours need to be disclosed on a sale of a house, which my knowledge behind it and what my understanding would be not, but I don't know for sure. And that would not be something that would affect property value unless witnessed when they're purchasing a home. And if we meet all these things that we're asked to meet, would not know any better than 4 cars being there for a family dinner or a pool party, or just a backyard little get together. So that part was really curious to me. I never knew of anything having to be put down on the fact of when a purchase of a home was being sold with a residential business next door.
Anything else? No, I think I'm.
Oh, okay, you're done?
Yeah.
All right, so I just had a couple points that kind of weren't, more just general points that I was listening to. So we're both teachers. I know we have other teachers in the crowd. So my thought, and as a parent, as parents of all of it, it goes back to the kids. It's very student-centered. Everything comes back to the kids. And when I think of a community, I think of the future of that community, which is our children. Last meeting, we had the privilege of hearing 2 young gentlemen get up here and speak in front of you. Extremely intimidating, for young children. I don't know how old they were exactly, but probably around 10 years old. We both teach high schoolers. If high schoolers have a hard time just speaking to us as teachers, to their peers. That was really impactful for me. And I think it was pretty impactful for you guys as well as the people sitting in the crowd, because it was that important to them. They spoke from their heart. They were ones that had gone to other swim lessons. That we heard it from the mouth of the kids that was, we've been to other things. It's not as effective as what Ms. Jill's running. The sense of the self-esteem and the self-confidence right there that they showed right there is hard to argue how important this is to the future of our community. There are many ways to combat a lot of the arguments that were brought up. The one argument that I don't think we can argue is just the people not wanting it to happen. But the traffic, the cars in the driveway, the people crossing the street, they wouldn't be crossing the street if they're getting out of the car in our driveway. A lot of the things that we've put in place to make this run successfully would mitigate all those concerns, except for the one of just not wanting it to happen. The biggest, what to me what it all boils down to is our immediate neighbors, Barb and Mel Meyer, who were the initial concern and brought this to the village, have purchased another house. They're moving. When we went to all the other neighbors around, they were willing to work with us. At least they were until maybe tonight when they got up here and changed their tune, a few of them. But they were willing to make concessions and work with us if the other ones complied. When the Myers move, is this as big of an issue if we're doing all the things that we discussed? And that, to me, that's the frustrating part is, will it bring the property value down? Most likely not. Like you heard, it might even increase it with, young families moving in. And at the end of the day, what's best for the future of our community? I know there was some chuckles about the profit. I think that just speaks to the character of some people. My question to the board is, do we have to have a permit to run free lessons? My wife is passionate about this. Obviously, it's something that's important to the community, important to keeping kids safe in the water. But if it came down to it, do we need a permit? If we had our own license to have ourselves covered, do we need a permit to run free lessons out of the generosity and of our heart to do what's good for the community? Is that something that would be needed?
Well, I'm not sure we're addressing that part right now, Mr.
Okay,
Walter.
I just was curious if that could even be an
I
option.
think you're
Yeah.
trying to address the questions that were raised by the public.
Gotcha, yeah. So I was curious about that in just the sense of this is, the last thing is just as important to the kids, future of the community, we heard it from them. To me, that was pretty impactful and, taking a really good opportunity away from the future of what Cary is here, our children growing up, and we wouldn't have that option available to them. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. and Mr. Walter. Okay, so just double checking here. So I know that some of you are probably counting the members that are up here in the dais, and so Mr. Euler, he doesn't vote when we get to that part of it. And some of you may or may not be aware that we recently had an 8th associate member, who is Mr. Stefani. And for those of you that don't know, that's Mr. Stefani. So in tonight's vote, because we have a full dais of members, he won't be voting. He could, under normal circumstances, vote on this petition because it is a conditional use. If it was an appeal or variance, he could not, even if we had 3 members absent. That's just something we did internally because sometimes when people are traveling, we didn't have enough members present. So you see 8 of us up here as EPA members, 7 of us will be voting tonight, and Mr. Stefani, he's the 8th associate member, he would not be voting. That's just a standard operating procedure, so I wanted everybody to be aware of that, in case you were wondering how come someone didn't vote when we get to that part of the exercise, okay? All right. So, gentlemen, before I call the motion, I know we've gone through this now, this is our second meeting here. I want to give everyone the opportunity to ask questions amongst yourselves about the application, if you have any questions. Or any comments you have amongst each other before I call the motion?
What other businesses do we have registered that are in the home? Do you know, Brian?
It's a good question. So the village has 2 types of home occupations that we allow in our code. So any residential district individuals can operate a business out of their home sufficient that they comply with those standards in the ordinance. So there's the 2 conditions, the type A conditional use, which is permitted by right. So there's no registration that's required with the village. So any individual that has customers coming to their home, could be an accountant's office, hair cuttery, those types of operations, they can use a portion of their home for the business, and there's no requirement for them to register with the village. So I couldn't give an exact answer as to how many businesses there are in homes in the community because they're not required to register with us. Generally, if we have a concern with a business that's operating from a home, we'll address it with them if there's a complaint to advise them of what the concerns are, or a resident will contact us in advance of what the requirements are, and we'll give them the section of the code. But there's not usually a follow-up unless there's an issue that occurs from that standpoint. The request for this evening is for a type B home occupation, and that's a more intensive an operation compared to what the code allows for a type A, and that's We have not had, since the code was adopted in the late 90s and that provision was put in the code, there's not been a request for a conditional use for that type of home occupation in the village. So this is the first request that's come before the zoning board and the village board of that matter.
So moving forward, then I guess this might be a question for council as well. This is obviously, to someone's point, a precedent that we're setting for, let's say, not just for pool, but another company, another in-home thing could come and say, well, you told them they could do X amount of days, X amount of time, we can do that too, right? That's typically how it would work.
Yeah, and in the code as well, from perspective, it has standards that are established in the code, so the maximum that can be placed for an operation, and staff comments are in the staff report, kind of highlighted those as far as the worst case scenario. Certainly a board through review of a petition can put additional restrictions on that as part of the conditional use permit, so that if you wanted to have less vehicles or less impact in the neighborhood, depending on what the business type is, those types of conditions could be placed on something should the board approve that request. But certainly, from a precedent standpoint, there's the ability, if somebody is approved, that somebody could have a similar request. But just because the board has approved something in one location doesn't mean that necessarily the same conditions would exist in other properties. So it wouldn't be a definitive that it would be, but certainly that could be a case that the board would look back on and say, these are the conditions we approved before, and that they might look similar to another case and look favorable.
Okay. And then, does the village have any, not any law, but how many cars, or is there an issue with the amount of cars that someone can have in their driveway? I don't know if I didn't look that up and I apologize, but, meaning just like, not just coming in and out, but like, I got 4 kids, all in high school and college, cars, not me. But I'm just an example. Can they have a car? Right?
Right. And there's no limitation on the number of vehicles a family can have. So if you have a driveway, they can accommodate 20 vehicles as long as they're licensed and operable. In that respect. Yeah. You can have that many vehicles. If they're not licensed, they would have to be stored inside. That's a property maintenance issue, so we don't have dilapidated vehicles around the community. But certainly if you have a family of 6 or 8, if you have that many drivers in the household, they have that many cars that they can park on the property, there's no restriction on the number of vehicles.
What about in the winter, Mr. Simmons?
Can't park in the street.
Oh, there you go.
Can't park on the lawn either.
Right.
Okay. Does that help, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, so I guess just as a discussion, one of the reasons I'm asking is that, there's in-home daycares, I know throughout probably the neighborhoods. It happens, I know, absolutely. So there's places, I see high school kids coming in, this is summertime, so especially kids have nothing to do, they're always moving around. So I'm always out there, trust me, because I live by Crystal Lake Avenue, I see them coming down my road, and I'm out there, slow down, all the time. Never gonna change, kids are kids, terrible, but it's true. So always doing that. So the point is with the cars and the safety, you don't know who's gonna move in next to you. It's not a given. Very rarely, we'll talk about property value. You don't know. You could have a multi-generational family come in that are going to have kids, and adults and grandparents all living. So nothing is certain when it comes to home value, because you could have, and I am a real estate agent, full disclosure. So, this is, from the numbers and what I've seen, is something that's just happening during the summertime. So, we never have to disclose that there's a commercial business happening. No one knows if there's what's going on. And to someone's point, there could be just kids getting dropped off because it's a play date. You're not going to, unless you start walking around the neighborhood and asking, which is everyone's right to do, but it shouldn't really, that's not going to be a huge dramatic increase, especially right now. But more importantly, the traffic and the safety is a big concern in my opinion as well. And I think that there's a way to maybe do something. I think to completely say no, and this is my opinion, is kind of, it's not, I respect people's small business and people trying to, listen, absolutely. Small businesses, people trying to make money, trying to do what they can, especially if it's something that is preventing deaths, which, putting the pictures of the kids, that's terrible. So I hope that it's a good thing. So the money is important, but when it comes down to it, is it, for me, I would say limit the time, make it during the day. Don't do it in the morning. I hear people, and to your point, I want to enjoy my morning, I want to enjoy my evening, absolutely. But from 12 to 2, when kids are out running around screaming, I mean, is that, is that more of a time? So I think, in my opinion, I think there's something that can be done. And that's just my opinion. So I don't know how that happens. I don't know if we are going to talk about.
So the way it would
yes,
work,
no,
Mr.
or-
Williams, you've been here long enough, that what would happen is that during the course of calling the motion, if you potentially wanted to incorporate those comments into the motion, we'd have to amend the motion, but that's the process.
Yes.
That's the process.
So that's kind of where I'm at, so everyone knows. I think there's, right off the cuff, I was looking, it's 3 weeks, 4 days a week, it's 12 days. I would say 10 to 12, it's 2 hours a day, it's 32 hours. I mean, and you do one family per hour. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's something, again, it's giving someone an opportunity for someone to have a better swimming lesson. I personally, if it was happening to me, sure, if it was in the morning, I'd get annoyed, but in the middle of the day, I live by a golf course. I got a golf course early in the morning, they're doing the blowing stuff. My choice, I live there. This is not your choice, this is someone's, home, and you should be able to enjoy it, but they should also have the opportunity to either provide a service or something, but it's that delicate balance of your home versus their home. So, who's right, one person or everybody? So in my opinion, I think that's what I would do. I would do 2 hours, 3 weeks out of the summer, 2 hours a day, 4 days a week. That's my opinion on the stipulations that I would put. Because I think that's, during the morning, yeah, I'd love to hear peaceful quietness. I agree. And in the evening, you should be able to enjoy your home. During the day, yeah, I live by a park. I'm never going to enjoy my home during the day. I got kids screaming. So that's, but that's fine. Again, I like it. That's why I moved. That's why I want the kids. But every neighborhood has ebbs and flows and kids and what's happening. So sometimes there's more kids, sometimes there's not kids. So that's just the flow.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Please.
Which type A or B allows for at-home childcare?
Type A.
Type A.
Yes.
Within type A, if a resident were to have childcare and that resident also had a pool, would they be able to take those children that they have in childcare and provide swim lessons for those children as part of their business?
Conditional use.
Yeah. From a detail, I mean, we haven't reviewed that level of detail for those type operations, but certainly if somebody's operating a daycare out of their home, there's different licensing requirements for those through the state as far as how they can operate and the number of kids they can have per parent from there. But certainly if they have a facility on their property, swing set or a pool that they can utilize for the kids that are on their property, that's certainly there available for them to be able to.
Okay. Similarly, I think there's other at-home services that should the homeowner choose to conduct those services outside their home, trumpet lessons. There's nothing that would prevent them from doing that currently. However, noise ordinances, et cetera, would have to be respected, and I think common courtesy, people don't do that out of common courtesy. I think the gentleman, Mr. Walter, raised a question that I do think is relevant. He asked that hypothetically, if they were providing this, if they were doing swim lessons and there was no exchange of money, but they had 8 friends come over every day, 4 days a week, would we be having this discussion?
Well, I'll ask Mr. Simmons to comment. My understanding is that it's not, this discussion is not about remuneration. The discussion is about a process and a conditional use.
Sure. I think it goes to how we define a business versus somebody enjoying their house, and part of their enjoyment is to provide lessons in the pool that they have. So,
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment, and what you may recall, Mr. Walter, this wasn't designed to be a back and forth. This is a design process for us to debate that point. The purview of the ZPA in general, we're not up here to tell people, how to make a profit. That's not the purview of this group. Your request is for conditional use for swim lessons. It didn't say swim lessons for a profit or, are not. It just said for swim lessons. So I think that discussion, Mr. Nance, the profit part of it, the money part of it, really is not the purview of our group here.
I think that's, I think it's an excellent clarification.
And I'll point out too, Mr. Nance, as far as the information that's on the screen currently, I presented this last month. There's additional requirements outside of the Unified Development Ordinance regarding the swimming pools. So there are, a family pool, if a family has a pool in their yard, they're able to utilize it for the benefit of their family. But once those pools are restricted as far as commercial activities. So if you're operating a business that's for-profit or not-for-profit, it is a commercial activity, whether or not money is being exchanged.
Absolutely. Excellent
So
clarification.
that's where this code comes into play outside the Unified Development Ordinance as far as there's specific regulations for swimming pools.
Yeah, very informative, thank you. Just a couple other comments, thank you, I'll be brief.
Clarification on there, just on there it says, in family pool is first line, it says, can be used by friends and might use it without payment of any fee. So there's no fee, it has a fee pointed out in there, where if it was, like you said, 8 friends coming over, if there's 3 boys come over and we teach swim lessons, we're not charging them because they're our friends. The way I read it, maybe it's wrong, is that it's without paying the fee. Invite friends over, it's no swimming business, it's teaching our friends, family, our cousins, swimming.
So, Mr. Nance, I'm going to try to address Mr. Waltz's question through Mr. Nance. Yeah. So, what we're dealing with here, and to be fair, that's why we have counsel here. We're not talking about a hypothetical if the decision on the table is what we've been talking about for the last 2 months. I think it's a fair comment, but the fact of the matter is that what the Walters are asking for is a conditional use permit that the village has never approved before. So that's the ask. Now, if they change their mind and they want to do business a different way, that's a different discussion for a different meeting, and that's certainly well within their purview. But for tonight, that's the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I do think that all discussion is healthy discussion, because it helps to focus in on the issue at hand. So again, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. It's a fair comment. Yeah.
Right. I do want to touch on Mr. Williams. His question, I believe, was, has there ever been a similar request to this in the history of the village? I think the answer was no.
Yeah, that's correct.
This is speculative on my part, but based on knowledge I have, this activity has occurred. I think it's likely that it has occurred. It doesn't make it right or compliant with the code, but it is interesting to note that it has not been brought before this board to anyone's knowledge prior. I am in favor of a modified schedule. I would be supportive of something, and we can discuss this further, but I would be supportive of something along the lines of they suggested 4 days a week. I'm in favor of reducing that to lessen the hours, perhaps instead of 12 hours to 8, and limiting that to 1 an hour.
Okay, so those types of things, Mr. Nance, once we get to the motion, there's a number of items listed in the motion, and I think that would be the appropriate time to potentially comment further once we get to that stage.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Jasper?
I wasn't going to talk.
That's fine. I didn't.
Now that you asked, like I told my brother at his daughter's wedding, you gave me the microphone. So here I go. First off, let me state that the comments, pro and con here, have been, for the most part, very informative and very helpful to the specifics of this situation. I think that as we consider this, I think that we have to draw back from the specifics before we dive back in. But we have to pull back from the specifics and look at it. I mean, we look at zoning, we look at appeals, we look at conditional use. You know, and all those things affect neighborhoods, affect individual families or property owners. You know, probably the biggest thing we did was Kerry Lake at Rotary Park. You know, we inconvenienced numerous households over a period of years in order to provide something to the community that's going to serve the entire community for a long time. And we can whittle that down, I think, to the issue where we get into the conditional uses, and we, you know, we don't, I'm not sure if it was back in here again, I don't remember seeing it, but within the additional packet, you know, it was a listing of people that got notices. And then we put the notices up in the neighborhood, you know, so that people are aware of it and, you know, can make the comments. And even on the other conditional uses, whether it be, you know, wanting to put in a pool or wanting to expand a garage or put in a side building or something along those lines. All the neighbors get a chance to, you know, input on it. And luckily, we haven't had a whole lot of back and forth with neighbors on issues such as that. You know, what I think makes this difference and as the same with those conditional uses, is that the conditional use specifically benefits one property rather than all the properties around it, or the community at large. Yes, there may be, we can argue that there may be benefits to the community as a whole for swimming lessons and so on and so forth as we get back into the specifics of this. But, you know, the decision tonight benefits one property. We send out those notices to everybody. We put out those signs so that people can comment on it for a reason. And, you know, whether it's one person or whether it's dozens of persons, you know, if somebody feels as though they are going to be disenfranchised by the grant of that conditional use, we, I think, have as much responsibility to take that into consideration as we do the person asking for the conditional use.
Yeah.
And I have a very hard time, and it would be the same again if it was a garage going in or somebody wanting to put a shed in their yard and their neighbor next door says, I don't like it. You know, I just have a hard time coming to a positive conclusion on this when it disenfranchises others directly within the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Jasper. And to try to put some context on Mr. Jasper's comments and also to Mr. Nats, you know, we've created this new thing called the UDO. Some of you have probably not heard of it. It's the Unified Development Ordinance. It's a direct consequence of what occurred with the PetCore application. Some of you will remember that. And there were two attorneys, one from our village and one from the competing application, debating literally what our code meant. And I think some of us that were there back then knew right then that we needed to do some work around our zoning ordinances, and we did, and we developed the UDO. And some of the comments that I've heard here tonight, gentlemen, maybe this will help us bring forward some new issues in our UDO. We designed it to be flexible. It doesn't cover every single thing because you can't possibly think of every single thing as much as you want to. And so perhaps at a future meeting, we can take up some of the issues that are very thoughtful tonight. But I think the issue at hand, gentlemen, is whether or not you want to comment further on this application, or you'd like me to call the motion, and then if you want to add or to subtract from it, you're welcome to do that, and then we're going to take a vote. So I think that's kind of where we are. But before I do that, Mr. Laughlin, I certainly want to give you an opportunity.
I would echo Mr. Jasper's statements in a lot of ways. Also, I guess for me, the hardest part was that we asked petitioner to go away and come up with a solution with the neighbors. And a survey was held, but no, when we look at the recommendations and what the new thought process is, we're not really seeing a finalized plan or commitment to the neighborhood on what the final plan would be. I think that Mr. Walter himself said that there was still room to make even more concessions and more changes for noise or sound and parking and traffic and other things. So, I think we're at that point of we're still not looking at a full end game here, in my opinion. And that's just where I'm at.
It's a fair comment, Mr. Olafson. So thank you. So, gentlemen, I certainly want to give everyone the opportunity. I know we've had 2 meetings over this, and there's been a lot of discussion. Mr. Graciano? You're good?
I'm good.
Yeah. Mr. Kretschmer?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've seen it, we've had a lot of people talk the last 2 months. We've had quite a few neighbors have come through, giving us their opinion. We've had the petitioner with with friends and people that are in the swim lessons as well. And it's been very clear that the neighbors don't like this. They don't want this. And I think it's disruptive to the neighborhood. And I don't see a way to make it not so.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kretschmer. All right, gentlemen, so without further ado, and before I do this, Mr. Stefani, I know this is a little bit new for you, but there's nothing that precludes you from offering comments, so I want to give you the opportunity to comment if you choose to.
No, I'm good.
All right, okay. All right, gentlemen. The chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a conditional use for a Type B home operation for swim lessons for the property located at 550 Red Cypress Drive, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments around the motion, or do we want to call a roll call?
Did you want to make any changes at this point? Did you want to make your hour changes?
If this is the appropriate time to do so.
That this would be the time, yeah. So we've called the roll, or called the motion, and seconded it. And if we wanted to add to conditions the recommendations, this would be when you do it.
It's okay. Yeah. So just so everyone's aware that some of the items were more or less covered. There's items 1 through 7 here in the petition you'll see here. So just double check that what you're potentially asking for.
You're looking at the first report.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but, okay.
I was looking at my motion. Thank you. So these items that are here tonight, the 1 through 8 now, not 1 through 7, 1 through 8. If you wanted to modify any of those, and then there would have to be support for it, of course. And so that's what we mean about modifying the motion. And if we don't want to modify the motion, we leave it as it is and we take a roll call.
Well, I would offer 8 hours a day, 9 to 5, 1 per hour, 6 weeks. And I would, all the other potential stipulations that are here, I would support.
Okay, so Mr. Natsa, just so I'm clear and so everyone's hearing the same thing, is that I think you're probably on item 4? Is that what you're referencing?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get very specific on what it is you'd like to change there.
Monday through Friday, although the petitioner suggested that they're doing it Monday through Thursday, so I'll modify that to say Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. 1 client per hour. I think they said they'd be agreeable to that. And 6 weeks maximum.
Okay. So now, yeah, okay. So council's suggesting to me, so that we're being transparent to all of you that are assembled here, that I'm going to read through items number 1 through 8. I know not everybody has the application in front of you, so there's a full record of this. And so the 8 items that are included in this particular motion is number 1, the conditional use would be for a Type B home occupation for a business providing swim lessons granted to Jill and Jesse Walter for the property located at 550 Red Cypress Drive. Item 2, class sizes shall be limited to a maximum of 4 non-related persons or a total of 6 persons in addition to the instructor. 3, short-term parking, including drop-off and pickup by customers, shall be limited to the driveway on the property. A maximum of 4 vehicles associated with the business operation may be parked on the driveway at any one time. Classes shall be appropriately staggered to limit any potential overlap of vehicles parking on the property from different classes and staging onto the public roadway. And Mr. Nats, I'm going to read this the way it was, and then if we decide to change it, we'll modify this. But the way it read originally was item 4, business operations shall be limited to Monday through Friday between 7:30 a.m. and 8 p.m. and shall not exceed more than 12 classes in any one day. Total vehicle trips associated with the business shall not exceed 100 trips more than 12 classes in any one day. Total vehicle trips associated with the business shall not exceed 100 trips per day. Then item 5, business operations other than drop-off or pick-up of students shall be restricted to the pool area in the rear yard. Customers shall not congregate or utilize other portions of the property when not receiving instruction. Item 6, the petitioner shall provide the village with proof of insurance for the business operations. 7, to ensure compliance with the conditions of approval, the petitioner shall provide a class schedule and a roster at the beginning of each new season. Classes are to be offered upon the request of the Community Development Director. And that would be Mr. Simmons. And then item 8, the business shall comply with any and all applicable code revisions of section 14.3.3.2 of the Unified Development Ordinance related to the operation of a type B home occupation. So those are the conditions associated with the motion. And I know that's a lot to digest, but that's what the request is about, and that was part of the staff report. Now, back to Mr. Nance. If you wanted to change that, I think what you said, sir, is that you wanted to change item number 4, business operations shall be limited Monday through Thursday between 9 to 5 p.m. and shall not exceed more than 12 classes in any one day, and total vehicle trips associated with the business shall not exceed 100 trips per day?
Well, and to clarify, I said 1 per hour, which would make that 8 classes per day.
8 classes per day. Okay. So now what we would need to do is have support for that change.
Oh, I made the motion, I'll support it.
Okay. So if Mr. O'Laughlin made the motion, there was a second somewhere. We need someone to second Mr. O'Laughlin to move this forward.
Wasn't that the second to the change that was requested?
Nance made the
Was that
motion.
in the form of a motion?
Well, he needs to do that. I mean, you're talking about Robert's rules now, I think. Is that where you're?
Well, yeah, our new member, Mr. Nance.
Mr. Nance.
Yeah. Was that not the form of a motion he was making?
I
And
didn't
Mr.
say that
O'Loughlin seconding it?
I can second my own proposal, I guess.
No.
Because he makes the motion, then we need a second.
Right.
So
So
Mr.
Mr.
Laughlin is a second.
Right. So we're good. Okay.
Okay.
So beyond that now, I think unless there's any other changes, gentlemen, to this motion, the motion in items 1 through 8, unless there's any other changes, I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons to do a roll call on this.
I'm sorry,
On the motion.
on
Well,
this motion that we just discussed.
The whole motion, the whole thing,
The whole thing?
The
or
whole
just this
shebang.
motion?
The whole thing.
the whole shebang.
He wanted to change item 4. It was agreed to. It's in there. And now we're taking a roll call on the entire motion
There we go.
with a modified 4.
Yep,
Got it?
got it.
All right.
Is there any other modifications that individuals would like to make as far as the class sizes? I heard some of the comments before as far as number of individuals in the class. Or if everybody's fine, that's fine.
I think
Just wanna- okay.
I personally think it should be modified to a different time. I think that's a lot. But if that's where the support is.
Well, if you got an idea, put it
Well, I
out
mean,
there,
yeah,
and
so
he can change his motion.
What I said before is during the middle of the day, I know 9 to 5 is the general work time, but during the middle of the day is less, for lack of a better term, annoying, because it's the middle of the day and people are, for the most part, unless they're working, night shifts, they're up and about and doing stuff. So I would have suggested something during the middle of the day. When I took my kids to a private lesson, there was one, you stayed in the car, your kids went out, but it was one person was swimming, one person was out. So I think I would do the Monday through Thursday, but I would limit it to maybe 2 hours a day, 3 hours at the most, meaning like it would only be, three, no more than 2 kids. Because again, if you have a sibling, that makes sense. You're not going to have just 1 kid.
So are you asking Mr. Williams to ask Mr. Nance to
Would you
amend his motion?
reconsider that motion?
Can I comment on the comment?
Please.
You're talking about 3 hours a day, that's 3 one-hour lessons a day. That's 12 a week.
Yep.
Why bother?
I bother with what?
Doing it at all for 3 lessons a day.
Well, they can do it. I mean, it's about the kids getting an opportunity to swim. I don't know what the question.
But I'm
Because
saying
the
if,
petitioner's passionate.
Well, it's not, if it's about giving kids an option, whether it's 12 hours a day or 36, it's an option.
Right.
So you're giving, you might not like the limited time, but it's the option. We go big, go home, then we're precedent setting. So right now, I'm thinking there's a little bit. If it works, it works. If it's not so good, then you know what? We know that 12 hours was too much. I feel like 9 to 5, this is 6 days a week. That's the whole summer.
So,
So
Mr.
I'm trying to
Williams,
meet
you're
in the
going to
middle.
forgive me, but I think in order for us to have this discussion, we need to see if there's agreement by the ZBA for what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
And if there isn't, that's going to be okay too. And if there is, that's okay too.
I'm just making my comments heard.
So I'm trying to understand now if there's support for what you're suggesting from the ZBA.
Well, wouldn't the support be most important coming from Mr. Nats?
Yes, there has to be an amendment to the
Yeah.
motion.
So the ball is in your court.
I suggested 9 to 5 because I believe that those are typical business hours. I
Okay,
say
so that's
typical.
all we needed to hear. So you're not in support of Mr. Williams' suggestion. So, Mr. Williams, thank you.
Okay.
But there's not support for that. So are there any other changes, gentlemen, that you want to see in this before I ask Mr. Simmons to call the roll? And I want to say thank you to all of you for your patience. So, Mr. Simmons, I think we're going to call the roll now.
This is for the recommendation to approve would be to recommend approval of the conditional use request with the 8 conditions, with condition 4 as amended for the time.
That is exactly right.
Jasper?
No.
Williams?
Yes.
Kretschmer?
No.
Graziano?
No.
O'Laughlin?
No.
Nats?
Yes.
Corey?
No. So, Mr. and Mrs. Walter, I want to say thank you very much for the attention you've given to this. You might recall from our July the 8th meeting, the final arbiter of your application is the elected officials, which now will occur on the 21st. You've received a negative recommendation from the ZPA. It doesn't mean it can't be overturned. You can make your case to the elected officials at that time. All right? And I want to say thank you to the audience. I know this has been a little bit of a long, arduous process for everyone involved, and especially for those of you that are coming out more than twice. And for the record, for those of you that aren't aware, we do have these meetings from time to time. You're always welcome here, and we'd love to see you back. So thank you very much for conducting yourself in a very professional manner. Ms. Walter, I think it's well regarded that you're very good at what you do. I think we all admire that. But that's not what that request was about. It wasn't whether or not Ms. Jill Walter was a good swim instructor. I think it was a different issue altogether. So the next step in the process is to simply stay in touch with Mr. Simmons, and he can help you through the next stage of that process, okay? All right. So before we adjourn, gentlemen, I just want to double check now with Mr. Simmons about future dates for the ZPA.
We will have a meeting in early September. I have 2 cases that are pending for that meeting, so there will be a meeting in early September.
Yeah. Well, you've been patient with us. I think you deserve a kick of the can, so.
If all of you are veterans of this process, you don't need my explanation, but this is a recommending body. So this body has taken all the information that you've been kind to share with it to take a vote and make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees and the mayor. So this matter now proceeds to the board at it will be the next meeting?
21st.
21st.
for the board to make a decision on whether or not to grant or deny the request that, that this body has made a recommendation about. So this is not a final decision, this is a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Euler. And, since we've got a number of people here, Mr. Simmons has worked hard on developing the UDO. There are some circumstances where the decision that this body has made, so for those of you that come to these from time to time, one of them, if I'm remembering, Mr. Simmons, is the signs, right? Would be so if someone wanted to put a sign out, this body could be the final authority on that. That happens sometimes. But in general, as Mr. Euler said, our elected officials are the final decision maker. It's been my experience that if a vote was, say, 7-0 positive, it goes on something called a consent agenda. And typically, not always, but typically, they agree to it. They don't always 100% have to follow the recommendation of this body. They tend to, but they don't always do that. So that's why we're trying to be very transparent here about the process and the next steps. All right? Okay, so Mr. Simmons, anything else that you would like to add?
Nope.
What I would like to suggest, Mr. Simmons, and we don't have to bring this out tonight, I think some items came up in tonight's meeting about different conditional uses and what they could or couldn't mean. And maybe as time permits, as we work our way through the remainder of the year, maybe we can discuss that at a future meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So without further ado,
So moved. Second.
Chair will seek
I beat you that time, Frank.
Chair will seek a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second? Did I have a second?
You had a second.
Okay,
We all second.
meeting adjourned.
Left side second.
Motion and a second.
Hey.
I'll second. Yeah, and I think the other one, Scott, is
I don't think I've ever heard a nay vote.